I'd never been the first one to leave a footprint somewhere before. The helicopter's rotors kicked up dust that didn't exist as we descended, the landing skid settling onto the concrete with a gentle bump. Through the window, I could see the helipad was immaculate. Not a single scuff mark or oil stain anywhere. That wasn't right. Helicopter pads always had marks. Always. "Clear to disembark," the pilot announced over our headsets. I unclipped my harness, grabbed my pack, and slid the door open. The air hit me first, completely still, neither hot nor cold, and carrying no scent whatsoever. It felt processed somehow, like the air in a climate-controlled museum. I hesitated at the edge of the chopper, studying the pristine surface below. "Something wrong, Peter?" Angela called from behind me. "No, just..." I shook my head and stepped down onto the pad. My boot made a perfect imprint in what looked like a thin layer of dust that hadn't been visible from inside. I stared at it for a moment, then deliberately placed my other foot down beside it. 2 perfect footprints on a surface that should have been covered with marks from previous landings. I moved aside as the others began to disembark, watching as each of their footsteps created the same perfect impressions. It was like walking on fresh snow, except it wasn't snow. Just some kind of fine, pale powder, coating an otherwise immaculate landing pad. And then I looked up. The skyline hit me like a physical weight. Gleaming towers of glass and steel stretched as far as I could see, arranged in perfect geometric patterns. Sunlight reflected off surfaces that seemed to shimmer slightly as if they weren't quite solid. The scale was impossible. Miles of cityscape in every direction, and all of it looked brand new. "Holy shit," I whispered. 3 days ago, this had been empty coastline. Satellite imagery confirmed it. Now it was a megacity that would make Shanghai look modest. "Gather up, people," Angela called, her voice cutting through my thoughts. I tore my eyes away from the skyline and joined the others as they formed a loose circle around our team leader. Angela Henry had the kind of presence that commanded attention without her having to work for it. 20 years of field leadership experience had given her an unflappable calm that I'd come to rely on. Right now, I needed some of that calm, because nothing about this place made sense. "All right," she began, adjusting her red windbreaker. "Let's review what we know and what we're here to do." Which wasn't much on either count. The Chinese government had detected unusual seismic activity along their southern coast 3 nights ago. When they sent drones to investigate the next morning, they found this, an entire city, fully built, where nothing had existed before. After their initial team went radio silent 8 hours after entering, they reached out to our international research group. "Our mission is observation and data collection only," Angela continued. "We have 48 hours to gather as much information as possible and report back. We are not to interact with any technology we find beyond basic documentation. We stay together as a group, unless I specifically authorize separation." I glanced at the others, gauging their reactions. We'd all been briefed before the flight, but hearing it again while actually standing in this impossible place made it more real. "Peter will be documenting architectural and cultural aspects," Angela gestured to me. "Andy is handling geological assessment, Mary's on structural engineering, Casey's monitoring all communications and electronic systems, and Carol will analyze environmental factors." Each specialist nodded as their name was called. I'd worked with all of them before on various anomaly investigations, but never as a complete team. Angela had handpicked each of us for this mission specifically. "Questions before we move out?" Angela asked. Mary raised her hand. "What about the Chinese team? Are we looking for them as well?" "That's not our primary objective, but yes, we'll document any signs of their presence," Angela replied. "Their last transmission came from the Central District, which is where we're heading first." No one else spoke up. I think we were all still processing the scale of what we were seeing. An entire city built overnight. It wasn't possible, yet here we were. "Stay alert, stay together," Angela said, shouldering her pack. "Let's move out." We fell into formation behind her as she led us toward a wide boulevard that stretched away from the helipad. I took up position at the rear, camera already in hand. My job was to document everything: architecture, layout, any signs of inhabitants or culture. Usually, I approached new sites with a methodical plan, but this, where do you even start with something like this? I snapped photos as we walked, trying to capture the impossible scale. The buildings were unlike any architectural style I recognized, not quite modernist, not quite futurist. They had a strange organic quality despite their geometric precision, as if they'd grown rather than been constructed. About 2 minutes in, I realized what was bothering me most. "It's too quiet," I said, stopping in my tracks. The others paused, looking back at me. "What do you mean?" Casey asked, his hand instinctively going to the communications equipment at his belt. I held up a finger. "Listen." They did, and then, one by one, I watched the realization dawn on their faces. There was nothing to hear. No birds, no insects, no distant traffic or machinery, not even the sound of wind against buildings, just our breathing and the soft crunch of our footsteps. "That's not right," Carol said quietly. She was our environmental specialist, and I could see her already pulling out monitoring equipment. "There should be something. Even in the most sterile environments, there's ambient sound." "Could it be acoustic dampening?" Mary suggested, looking up at the buildings around us. "Some kind of noise cancellation technology built into the structures?" "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. This wasn't just quiet. It was absence. Like the world outside our little group had been muted. We continued walking, more alert now. The boulevard was wide enough for 8 lanes of traffic with sleek vehicles parked along both sides. Perfect vehicles. Not a scratch, not a dent, not a speck of dirt on any of them. "Check this out," Andy called, having moved to examine one of the cars. We gathered around as he pointed through the window. Keys hung from the ignition. A half-empty coffee cup sat in the holder. A jacket was thrown across the passenger seat. "Looks like someone just parked and walked away," he said. I moved to the next car and peered inside. Same thing. Personal items scattered about, keys still there. A phone on the dashboard, screen dark. A child's stuffed animal in the back seat. "They're all like this," Casey reported, having checked several more vehicles. "It's like everyone just vanished midday. Or they were never here at all," I said quietly. The others looked at me. "What do you mean?" Angela asked. I gestured around us. "Everything's too perfect. These aren't lived-in spaces. They're, I don't know, staged? Like a movie set designed to look like a city." "But who would build something this elaborate?" Mary asked. "And why?" No one had an answer for that. We continued down the boulevard, passing storefronts with displays that looked exactly like what you'd expect, except again, too perfect. Mannequins posed in windows wearing this season's fashions, cafes with tables set with untouched meals, newspapers dated 3 days ago, the day before the city appeared, neatly stacked outside convenience stores. The more I saw, the more wrong it all felt. Cities have rhythm, they have flow. They have the random chaos that comes from millions of people living their lives in close proximity. This place had none of that. Everything was arranged with mathematical precision, from the spacing of trees along the sidewalk to the arrangement of benches in plazas. "Peter," Angela called from up ahead, "what do you make of this?" I joined her at what appeared to be a subway entrance. The sign above it was in Mandarin, perfectly rendered. "It says Central Station," I translated, having spent enough time in China to pick up the basics. "Should we go down?" Angela considered it for a moment, then shook her head. "Not yet. Let's get a better sense of the surface first." As we continued, I found myself studying the others, curious about their reactions to this place. Andy kept stopping to collect samples of building materials. His geologist's curiosity clearly piqued. Mary was taking measurements and making notes about structural supports, occasionally shaking her head in what looked like disbelief. Casey had his communication equipment out, scanning for signals but finding none, judging by his frustrated expression. Carol moved slowly, her environmental sensors held out before her like divining rods, and Angela led us with the same steady confidence she always showed, though I noticed she checked her GPS more frequently than usual. Not that it would help much. The map showed nothing but empty coastline where we now stood. The Central District came into view after about 20 minutes of walking. Taller buildings, more densely packed, with a massive structure at the center that resembled a combination of City Hall and corporate headquarters. Its facade was mirrored glass that reflected the surrounding skyline, creating a disorienting effect. "That's where the Chinese team's last transmission came from," Angela said, pointing to the central building. We all stared at it for a moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was staring back. "Let's keep moving," Angela decided. "We'll circle the perimeter of the Central District before heading in." As we walked, I found myself drawn to the smaller details. Street signs that matched standard Chinese municipal design. Traffic lights that changed on regular intervals, despite there being no traffic. Surveillance cameras mounted at intersections, their red lights blinking steadily. Wait. Blinking? I stopped and pointed up at one of the cameras. "That's active." The others followed my gaze. "Casey?" Angela prompted. He already had his equipment out scanning. "There's no wireless signal coming from it, no network traffic at all, but it's definitely powered." "So what's it recording to?" I asked. "And who's watching?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The feeling of being observed intensified as we moved deeper into the city. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following us, but there was never anyone there. Just empty streets and perfect buildings, and that unnatural silence. We passed a park where the trees stood in geometric arrangements, their leaves perfectly symmetrical. A playground where the swings hung completely motionless, not even swaying in a breeze, because there was no breeze. "The air quality readings are bizarre," Carol announced suddenly, studying her monitor. "There are no particulates. None. Not even the normal atmospheric dust you'd find anywhere on Earth." "What about composition?" Angela asked. "Standard nitrogen-oxygen mix, but..." Carol frowned. "There's something else. Some trace element I can't identify." That made everyone stop. Unknown atmospheric components weren't something you wanted to be breathing. "Is it harmful?" Mary asked, voicing what we were all thinking. Carol shook her head. "Readings show no toxic properties. It's just not something I've seen before." "Masks on, everyone," Angela ordered. We all complied, pulling specialized filtration masks from our packs and securing them over our faces. Better safe than sorry. The masks added to the surreal quality of our exploration. Now we looked as alien to this place as it felt to us. As we approached the central building, I couldn't shake the growing sense of wrongness. Everything about this city was perfect, too perfect, and completely empty of life. No birds, no insects, not even a stray leaf blowing down the street. "I feel like we're being watched," I said finally, giving voice to the sensation that had been building since we arrived. "Yeah," Andy agreed immediately. "Been feeling it for the last 10 minutes or so." The others nodded. Even Angela looked uneasy. "Keep your eyes open," she said. "Document everything, but touch nothing unless absolutely necessary." We continued toward the central building, our footsteps the only sound in a city built for millions. Questions tumbled through my mind with each step. Why was everything so perfectly preserved? Who could have built an entire city overnight? Where did all the people go, or were there never any people at all? And most disturbing of all, if we were being watched, who or what was doing the watching? I glanced up at another surveillance camera as we passed beneath it. Its red light blinked steadily, mechanically. Watching. Recording. Waiting. We were being observed. I was certain of it now. And whatever had created this impossible city was studying our reactions just as carefully as we were studying its creation. The stairwell was 20 minutes in, and my legs were already burning. We'd decided to avoid the elevators. Nobody wanted to be trapped in a metal box in this place. But 15 floors up, a concrete staircase had me rethinking that choice. "You doing all right back there, Peter?" Angela called down, not even sounding winded. She was 3 flights ahead, moving with that efficient pace she always kept on field missions. "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't. The mask made it worse, trapping my breath and making the air feel thick and uncooperative. "Just enjoying the view of identical concrete landings." Andy chuckled somewhere above me. "Should have kept up with those morning runs, man." I didn't answer that. I was too busy thinking about how wrong this stairwell felt. It was immaculate. No scuff marks on the walls, no cigarette butts in the corners, no graffiti. Every residential building I'd ever been in had stairwells that told stories of the people who used them. This one was silent, sterile, like it had been built yesterday. But the building itself was at least 20 years old, based on the architectural style. The concrete should have been weathered, cracked in places. There should have been signs of repair, of maintenance, of life. I stopped on the landing of the 16th floor to catch my breath, leaning against the wall. The surface was cool against my back, perfectly smooth. I pulled out my water bottle and took a quick drink, lifting my mask just enough. "We're at 23, Angela's voice echoed down. "Making good time." "Coming," I called back, capping my bottle and pushing off the wall. The rhythm of climbing stairs gave me time to think. 3 days ago, satellite imagery showed nothing here but empty coastline. Then, yesterday morning, reconnaissance drones picked up this, a fully formed city appearing literally overnight. The brass had scrambled our team, wanting eyes on the ground before making any major decisions. We were the canaries in the coal mine. The thought wasn't comforting. By the time I reached the 30th floor, even Angela was showing signs of fatigue. She'd slowed down, taking the stairs more deliberately. Mary and Casey had fallen back, while Carol was somewhere between us. Andy had moved ahead, eager to get to the roof for his geological survey. 5 more floors, Angela said when I caught up. Her breathing was controlled but deeper than normal. "We'll check a few apartments on this level first." I nodded, grateful for the break. The stairwell door opened to a hallway that could have been in any upscale apartment building in any major city. Recessed lighting, tasteful gray carpet, numbered doors spaced evenly along both sides. Everything perfect, everything wrong. "Let's try this one," Angela said, stopping at apartment 3017. She reached for the handle, no hesitation, no knock, and turned it. The door swung open easily. "Unlocked," she noted, glancing back at me. "All of them probably are," I said, the unease settling deeper into my stomach. We'd already discovered that the vehicles on the street had keys in the ignition, shops had been left open. Whatever had created this place hadn't bothered with security. The apartment was spacious and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. Modern furniture, tasteful art on the walls, hardwood floors with area rugs. A living room flowed into an open kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. "Look at this," Angela said, opening the refrigerator. It was fully stocked: milk, eggs, vegetables, condiments. She picked up the milk carton, checking the date. "Expiration is next week." I walked over and looked inside. Nothing was spoiled. Nothing had even begun to spoil. "That's impossible," I said. "If this city appeared 3 days ago." "Exactly." Angela put the milk back and closed the door. "Either time works differently here, or it was all created at once," I finished. Food and all. We moved through the rest of the apartment. The bedroom had a king-sized bed with the covers pulled up neatly. The closet contained men's and women's clothing, arranged by color. In the bathroom, I found toothbrushes standing in a holder, toothpaste with the cap on, towels hung perfectly on racks. "Someone lives here," I said, "or is supposed to." "But where are they?" Angela asked, running her hand along the dresser top. She looked at her fingers. "No dust." I went back to the kitchen and opened drawers. Silverware, organized. Cooking utensils, arranged by size. I found a drawer with papers, bills, receipts, a checkbook. I picked up one of the bills. "Electric bill," I said. "Dated last month, made out to David and Susan Chen." "Put it back," Angela said. "Document it, but don't take anything." I took a photo with my camera, then returned the bill exactly as I'd found it. "The Chens don't exist, do they?" Angela didn't answer. She didn't need to. We left that apartment and tried another. Same story, fully furnished, stocked with food, personal items arranged as if the occupants had just stepped out. We found a family apartment with 3 bedrooms, the master for parents, one that looked like a teenage girl's room, and one for a younger child. The child's room stopped me cold. It was painted blue with cloud patterns on the ceiling. Toy cars lined a shelf, action figures stood in poses on a desk. The bed had a rocket ship comforter pulled up neatly. A backpack hung on a hook by the door. I opened the backpack and found school books, notebooks, pencils. One notebook had math homework, dated 3 days ago. The handwriting was childish but neat. The name at the top read, "Michael Wilson, grade 3. "Peter," Angela said from the doorway. "You okay?" I realized I'd been standing there, staring at the homework for too long. "Yeah, there should be a kid here. A real kid named Michael who likes rockets and does his math homework." "But there isn't," she said gently. "No." I put the notebook back exactly as I'd found it and zipped up the backpack. There isn't. We checked one more apartment, finding the same eerie perfection. Then we headed up to the roof where Andy was already working, taking measurements and photographs. The roof access door opened to bright sunlight and a panoramic view of the city. Andy was at the edge, his back to us, looking out through binoculars. "Find anything interesting?" Angela asked as we approached. Andy lowered the binoculars and turned. "You need to see this." He handed the binoculars to Angela. "Look at the layout, the grid pattern." Angela raised them to her eyes, adjusting the focus. After a moment, she said, "It's perfect." "Too perfect," Andy said. "Cities don't grow that way. They're organic, messy. They have older sections, newer developments, different architectural styles from different eras." I took the binoculars when Angela passed them to me. The view was breathtaking and disturbing. The streets formed perfect right angles. The buildings were distributed in a pattern that seemed almost mathematical. Even the green spaces, parks, plazas, were precisely placed, as if someone had designed the entire city using a grid system and never deviated from it. "It's like someone built a city who'd only read about cities but never actually seen one," I said, lowering the binoculars. "Exactly," Andy agreed. "There's no evolution here, no history. It's like it was all created at once, following some idealized blueprint." "What about geological markers?" Angela asked. "Any sign of foundation work, excavation?" Andy shook his head. "That's another problem. The bedrock shows no sign of disturbance beyond what would be needed for these buildings. No evidence of prior structures, no layers of development. It's as if the entire city was just placed here." The implications hung in the air between us. Cities aren't built in days. They grow over decades, centuries. They're layered with history, with the lives of the people who inhabit them. This place had none of that. We spent another 20 minutes on the roof while Andy completed his survey. The view should have been beautiful, but the perfect symmetry of it all made me increasingly uneasy. When Mary and Casey finally joined us, Angela decided it was time to move on. "Next stop is the hospital," she said. "It's about 6 blocks east of here." The walk through the empty streets was just as unsettling as before. Perfect sidewalks, perfect buildings, perfect silence. We passed more shops with displays that looked like they'd been arranged by the world's most meticulous visual merchandisers. More vehicles parked at perfect angles to the curb. The hospital was a modern structure of glass and steel, 12 stories high with a helicopter pad on the roof. The emergency entrance had automated doors that slid open as we approached. Inside, the reception area was spotless, computers at the desks still running, chairs arranged neatly in the waiting area, magazines fanned out on tables. "Listen," Mary said, holding up a hand. We all went still. There it was, a low humming, the sound of machinery running. The hospital systems were operational. "Split up," Angela decided. "Mary and Casey, check the lower floors. Carol, see if you can access their computer systems. Peter, you're with me, we'll head upstairs." Angela and I took the stairs, again avoiding the elevators, and emerged on the 3rd floor. The sign indicated we were in the surgical wing. The nurses' station had monitors displaying patient information, charts stacked neatly. We walked down the hallway, checking rooms. Each was prepared for a patient, beds made, equipment ready, monitors on standby. "The operating theaters," Angela said, pushing through a set of double doors. Inside, we found 3 operating rooms, fully prepped. Surgical instruments laid out on trays, machines humming, lights positioned over tables. Everything ready for surgeries that would never happen. "Check this out," I said, picking up a chart from a prep table. "Patient scheduled for gallbladder removal, 8 a.m. 3 days ago." I flipped through the pages. Complete medical history, consent forms signed. The patient's name is Robert Garcia, age 42. "Another person who doesn't exist," Angela said. We continued through the hospital, finding the same state of readiness everywhere. The maternity ward had incubators warmed and waiting. The pharmacy was stocked with medications, none expired. The cafeteria had food in serving trays, somehow still fresh. On the 5th floor, I stopped suddenly in the main corridor. There, in the middle of the polished floor, was a small gray form. "Angela," I called. She turned back and followed my gaze. A pigeon, dead. The only thing in this entire city that wasn't in perfect condition. I knelt beside it, careful not to touch. The bird lay on its side, wings folded, eyes closed. It looked peaceful, as if it had simply fallen asleep and never woken up. "We need Carol to see this," Angela said, already reaching for her radio. Carol arrived 10 minutes later, pulling on latex gloves as she approached. She knelt beside the bird, examining it carefully without touching. "No visible trauma," she said, "no signs of disease, and," she leaned closer, "no decomposition." "How long has it been dead?" I asked. Carol shook her head. "That's the strange part. It should show signs of rigor mortis, then bloating, then decay. There's none of that. It's as if it died and then stopped." "Stopped what?" Angela asked. "Stopped being subject to the normal processes of death," Carol said. "This bird isn't decomposing, isn't changing. It's in a state of perfect preservation, just like everything else in this city." I stared at the small gray form. One dead pigeon in a city of perfect emptiness. The only thing that hadn't been created in pristine condition. "Maybe it came from outside," I suggested. "Flew in from somewhere normal, then couldn't survive here," Carol finished. "That's my theory too." Angela was silent for a long moment. "Take samples," she finally said. "Document everything, but be careful." Carol nodded and opened her kit, pulling out collection vials and swabs. As she worked, I stepped back, looking up and down the empty hospital corridor. The lights hummed overhead, the air conditioning blew cool air through vents, monitors beeped at empty nurses' stations. A hospital with no patients, a city with no people, and one dead bird that had made the mistake of flying into this perfect, sterile simulation of life. I watched as Carol carefully placed the bird in a specimen bag, her movements precise and methodical. The pigeon was the only real thing we'd found, real because it had died, because it had failed to conform to the perfection of this place. And that scared me more than anything else we'd seen. I stared at the specimen bag in Carol's hands. The dead pigeon looked small and sad, its feathers still glossy under the harsh hospital lights. We should keep moving, Angela said. I want to see more of the commercial district before nightfall. We filed out of the hospital, our footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Nobody talked much. Finding that bird had shaken us all up more than we wanted to admit. It was the first real thing we'd found. Real because it had died. Everything else was just too perfect. The sun was still high when we stepped outside, maybe 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Hard to tell exactly with the weird light here. It bounced off the glass buildings in ways that made shadows fall at odd angles. "Where to now?" Andy asked, squinting up at the skyline. Angela consulted her tablet. "The main shopping district is about 8 blocks west. Let's head there." We walked in our usual formation, Angela leading, Andy and Mary behind her, me and Casey in the middle, and Carol taking up the rear. I kept my camera out, documenting everything. Not that there was much new to see, just more empty streets, more abandoned cars, more perfect storefronts with their displays untouched. "This is getting old fast," Casey muttered beside me. "Same thing block after block." "Yeah," I said. "But that's data too. The consistency is..." I trailed off, not sure how to finish that thought. "Creepy as hell?" Casey offered. "That works." We turned onto what looked like the main shopping street. The road widened into a pedestrian-only zone with fancy boutiques lining both sides. Designer clothing stores, electronics shops, jewelry displays, all lit up and ready for customers who weren't there. Angela stopped in front of a large department store. "Let's check this one out." The doors slid open automatically when we approached. Cool air hit us as we stepped inside, along with that distinct department store smell. Perfume and new clothes and plastic packaging all mixed together. "Split up and document each section," Angela said. "Meet back here in 30 minutes. I headed toward men's clothing, camera at the ready. The displays were immaculate. Dress shirts arranged by color, jeans stacked in perfect piles, mannequins posed in the season's latest styles. Price tags hung from sleeves and collars. I took a closer look at one. $68 for a button-down, I said to nobody in particular. Bit steep. I checked a few more tags. All the prices seemed normal. Not that I'm much of a fashion expert, but nothing jumped out as weird. Just regular clothes at regular prices in a regular store, except for the total absence of people. I moved through the aisles, taking photos and notes. Everything was just so ready. Like the store had opened that morning, expecting a busy day of sales. Registers were powered on. I pressed a key on one of them, and the screen lit up, showing a blank transaction. Curious, I pulled open the cash drawer. It popped open with a cheerful ding. Inside were neat stacks of bills and rolls of coins. I took a photo but didn't touch anything. "You find something?" Casey appeared at my shoulder, making me jump. "Jesus, don't sneak up on me," I said. "Yeah, look at this. Cash registers are fully stocked." Casey whistled low. "That's a lot of money just sitting there. And no one took it." I pushed the drawer closed. No looting, no signs of panic or evacuation. It's like everyone just vanished in the middle of a normal day. "Check this out," Casey said, holding up his tablet. "Security cameras are active. Recording lights are on, but they're not transmitting to any external network I can detect." I looked up at the ceiling. Sure enough, small black domes were positioned throughout the store, tiny red lights blinking steadily. "So they're recording, but not sending the footage anywhere?" I asked. "Seems that way, or they're sending it somewhere I can't trace, which shouldn't be possible." Casey frowned at his tablet. "Nothing about the tech here makes sense. It's all connected, but isolated at the same time." We met back at the entrance after 30 minutes. Everyone had similar reports. Perfectly stocked merchandise, functioning systems, no people. The women's department had new arrivals with yesterday's date on the tags, Mary reported, and the seasonal display was set up for summer. The electronics section had all the latest models, Andy added, fully charged and ready for demos. "Let's check a few more places," Angela decided. "I want to see a restaurant, We found one a block away, an upscale place with large windows and white tablecloths. The door was unlocked. Inside, tables were set with silverware and wine glasses, waiting for dinner service. "Kitchen's through here," Carol called from the back. We followed her voice and pushed through swinging doors into a commercial kitchen. The sight stopped me in my tracks. Half-chopped vegetables sat on cutting boards. A pot of soup simmered on a low burner. Plates were arranged with partially plated meals. Steaks seared but not finished. Salads dressed but not garnished. "Someone was in the middle of cooking," I said, moving closer to examine the food. It looked fresh, the vegetables still bright with color. I reached out, then stopped myself. "How long has this been sitting here?" Carol pulled out a probe from her kit. "Let me check the temperature." She inserted it into the soup, waited a moment, then checked the reading. 143 degrees. That's food-safe holding temperature. This soup has been at exactly the right temperature to keep it from spoiling. "For 3 days?" Andy asked. "Apparently." Carol moved to the steaks. "These haven't oxidized at all. They look like they were just put here. Like everything else in this city," I said. "Perfect preservation." We continued exploring the kitchen. The walk-in refrigerator was stocked with fresh produce and meat. The freezer held perfectly arranged frozen items. Nothing was expired, nothing was spoiled. I found myself in front of the staff schedule posted near the back door. Names and shifts were listed for the week, including today. Miguel, Sarah, and Jason were supposed to be working the dinner shift. Their aprons hung on hooks nearby. "Hey," Mary called from the dining room. "You should see this." We returned to find her standing by the host station, holding an open reservation book. "There are bookings for tonight," she said, turning the book so we could see. "Party of 4 at 6:30, couple at 7, group of 8 for a birthday at 8 o'clock. "Who made these reservations?" Angela asked. "Real people, apparently." Mary flipped back a page. "There are names, phone numbers, special requests. Yesterday's page has check marks next to parties that showed up." I felt a chill run down my spine. So, whatever happened, it happened today, after they prepped for lunch, but before customers arrived. We stood in silence for a moment, the implications sinking in. This wasn't a simulation or a planned city. This was a real place where real people had lived and worked until very recently. "We need to check more locations," Angela said finally. "Let's move." The next few hours blurred together as we explored shop after shop, restaurant after restaurant. The pattern was always the same. Everything in perfect condition, caught in mid-operation. A coffee shop with espresso shots, pulled but not served. A bookstore with a half-built display of bestsellers. A salon with scissors left open next to a chair with hair clippings that hadn't been swept up. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon when Casey nudged me. "Peter, look." He pointed toward the coastline, visible down a long east-west street. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. A wall of gray was moving in from the water, advancing slowly but steadily toward the city. "Is that fog?" I asked. "I think so," Casey replied. "But it's moving weird." He was right. The fog wasn't drifting in patches or swirling with the breeze. It was advancing as a solid mass, uniform in height and density, like a gray curtain being drawn across the landscape. "Angela," I called. "We've got something coming in from the coast." She joined us, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. "That's not normal fog behavior." The others gathered around us, watching the approaching wall of mist. It was maybe a mile away, but moving steadily in our direction. "The temperature's dropping," Carol announced, checking her instruments. 2 degrees in the last minute." I felt it too, a sudden chill that hadn't been there moments before. The air grew heavy, pressing against my skin. My chest tightened, making it harder to take a full breath. "Anyone else feel that?" I asked. "Like something sitting on your chest?" Andy nodded. "Yeah." "We should get inside," Angela decided. "Somewhere with a good vantage point to observe this safely." Casey was fiddling with his communications gear, frowning. "We've got a problem. Signal strength is degrading rapidly." "How bad?" Angela asked. "Bad. Satellite connection is fluctuating. Radio frequencies are filling with static." He adjusted something on his tablet. It started right when that fog appeared. The fog was moving faster now, only blocks away. The temperature continued to drop, and my breath was starting to fog in front of my face. "There," Angela pointed to a tall office building across the street. "Let's go." We jogged across to the building, the glass doors sliding open at our approach. Inside was a typical corporate lobby, security desk, directory, elevator bank, everything pristine and empty. "Up," Angela ordered. "I want to see this from above." We piled into an elevator, and Casey hit the button for the 20th floor. I wasn't thrilled about using the elevator, but the fog was almost upon us. No time for stairs. The doors opened onto an open-plan office space, rows of desks with computers, conference rooms with glass walls, a break area with couches and vending machines. We moved quickly to the windows facing the coast. The fog had reached the building. From our height, we could see it filling the streets below, flowing around structures like water. It was thick enough to obscure everything below the 10th floor. "It's not behaving naturally," Carol said, recording readings on her tablet. "The density is uniform throughout, and it's maintaining a consistent temperature regardless of ambient conditions." I pressed my hand against the glass. It was cold to the touch. "Can fog do that?" "No," Carol answered, "not without some kind of control mechanism." We watched as the gray mass swirled below us. From this vantage point, I could see patterns forming in the fog, currents and eddies that seemed almost deliberate, like it was searching for something, or someone. A sudden wave of dread washed over me, so intense it made me step back from the window. My heart pounded in my chest, and sweat broke out on my forehead despite the chill. "You okay?" Mary asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just, does anyone else feel weird looking at that stuff?" Andy nodded slowly. "Like you're being watched back." "Exactly." "It's affecting our equipment too," Casey reported. "All communications are down now. Satellite, radio, everything. Even the local mesh network I set up for our team." Angela frowned. "That shouldn't be possible." "Tell that to the fog," Casey muttered, still trying to get a signal. "Let's search this floor," Angela decided. "Document everything. Look for any clues about what happened here. We'll wait out the fog and see if communications restore when it passes." We split up again, moving through the office space. I headed toward what looked like executive offices along the far wall. The first few were standard: desk, computer, filing cabinets, personal items. Nothing unusual. The last office was larger, with a corner view and nicer furniture. The nameplate on the door read, "Dr. Victor Chen, Research Director." Inside, the desk was cluttered with papers and notebooks, the first genuine mess I'd seen in this city. I approached carefully, camera ready. The papers were covered in handwritten equations and diagrams I couldn't begin to understand. Scientific notation, complex formulas, sketches of what might have been molecular structures. One of the desk drawers was partially open. I pulled it wider, revealing a leather-bound journal wedged among office supplies. Something about it seemed out of place among the modern technology surrounding it. I lifted it out carefully. The cover was worn, the pages dog-eared from frequent handling. No name was visible on the outside. I opened to the first page. "Field Journal of Jude Nunez, Research Team Alpha," I read aloud. The date at the top was from 6 months ago. My breath caught. Jude Nunez. He was from the first exploration team, the one that disappeared 3 months ago, the one we were partly here to look for. I flipped through the pages quickly. The early entries were methodical and scientific. Observations about the city's architecture, notes on technology found, questions about the origin of the structures. Nunez's handwriting was neat and precise, but as I moved through the journal, the entries changed. The handwriting grew increasingly erratic, sentences fragmented, Diagrams and sketches appeared in the margins, abstract shapes that made no immediate sense. I stopped on an entry dated 3 months ago, around when contact with the first team was lost. "The fog came again last night," Nunez had written. "Thicker than before. Chen says it's just weather, but he's wrong. There's purpose to it. Intelligence. I've seen how it moves." The next paragraph sent a chill through me. "There are shadows in the fog, not reflections or tricks of light, actual moving shapes that don't correspond to any physical objects. They follow us, watch us. Chen doesn't believe me, but I've documented 17 distinct patterns of movement that cannot be explained by air currents or thermal variations." I turned the page. The others think I'm losing it. Maybe I am, but I know what I've seen. The shadows are getting bolder. Last night, one of them reached the 15th floor of our building. They've never come that high before. The final entry was dated exactly 3 months ago. "If anyone finds this, get out. Don't wait for nightfall. The fog is thickest then, and the shadows are strongest in the dark. They took Chen last night. Just reached right through the window and..." The entry ended there, mid-sentence. A long ink streak trailed off the page, as if Nunez's hand had been pulled away while writing. I closed the journal, my hands shaking slightly. Through the window, I could see the fog had completely engulfed the lower half of the city. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow that turned the gray mass below into something that looked uncomfortably like a living thing. And within it, though it might have been my imagination after reading Nunez's words, I thought I saw darker patches moving against the uniform gray, shadows sliding purposefully through the mist. My hands were still shaking. I stared at the journal, rereading the last few lines over and over, trying to make them say something else. The fog is not natural. Something moves within it. Shadows that shouldn't exist. The city is not abandoned. It's waiting. I looked up at the window again. The fog had risen higher, thick and gray against the glass. And there, I wasn't imagining it. Darker patches moved through it, not random swirls. Purposeful, directed. "Angela!" I called out, my voice breaking. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Angela! Everyone! You need to see this!" I heard footsteps in the hallway, quick and urgent. Angela appeared in the doorway first, her expression shifting from questioning to concerned when she saw my face. "What is it?" she asked, stepping inside. The others crowded behind her. Andy, Mary, Casey, Carol, all looking at me with varying degrees of curiosity and worry. I held up the journal. "I found this. It belonged to Jude Nunez. He was on the Chinese team." "The missing team?" Casey asked, moving closer. I nodded. "Yeah, and he documented everything they found, or everything before they disappeared." I flipped through the pages. "The early entries are just observations, similar to what we've been doing, but then, let me see," Angela said, holding out her hand. I passed her the journal. "The last few entries, they get strange. He talks about the fog, says it's not natural." Angela skimmed the pages, her expression hardening. She looked up at the window, then back at the journal. "According to this," she said, "the fog isn't just weather. There's something in it. And whatever it is, it took the Chinese team." "That's ridiculous," Andy said, but his voice lacked conviction. He glanced nervously at the window. "Is it?" I asked. "Look outside. Does that look like normal fog to you?" We all turned to the window. The fog had risen even higher, now covering most of the view, and those darker patches were still moving, sliding through the gray mass like fish through murky water. "Shit," Mary whispered. "We need to secure this location," Angela said, snapping back into command mode. "Casey, check if there's any working communication equipment in this office. Carol, see if you can find any information about the building's ventilation system. Mary, Andy, help me move furniture to block the door and any other entrances. Peter, keep documenting." Everyone moved immediately, grateful for direction. I stayed by the window, camera in hand, trying to capture the movement in the fog. It was difficult. The shapes were indistinct, visible only as slightly darker patches against the gray. But they were there, and they were moving with purpose. Angela was organizing the conference room as a defensive position. She'd pushed the long table against the far wall and was arranging chairs to create a clear line of sight to the door. Mary and Andy were dragging filing cabinets from nearby offices to block the secondary entrance. "There's a security office down the hall," Casey called out, returning from his search. "Monitors are still on. We can see the entire building." Angela nodded. "Show me." I followed them down the hallway to a small room with a bank of monitors showing different areas of the building. The lobby, hallways, stairwells, elevator banks, all empty. Except, "Wait," I said, pointing at one of the screens showing the lobby. "What's that?" We all leaned closer. The lobby was filled with fog. It had clearly entered the building already. But within that fog, the camera captured what looked like human silhouettes, moving slowly through the space. "Those can't be people," Casey said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Switch to infrared," Angela ordered. Casey pressed a few buttons, and the screen changed to show heat signatures. The lobby was cold, uniformly blue, with no sign of human warmth. "What the hell?" Andy muttered. I looked out the security office window, which faced the same direction as the lobby. Nothing but fog, no visible figures, yet the cameras showed them clearly. "They only show up on camera," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "Look, outside the window, you can't see them, but the cameras pick them up." "That's impossible," Mary said. "So is a city that appears overnight," I countered. Angela straightened up. "We need to monitor all entrances. Casey, stay here and watch these feeds. If you see anything approaching our position, alert us immediately." We returned to the conference room where Carol was waiting with a building schematic she'd found. "The ventilation system is centralized," she reported, pointing to the diagram. "All the air intakes are on the roof, and there are emergency shutoffs in the maintenance room on this floor." "Show me," Angela said. Carol led Angela out, leaving me with Mary and Andy in the conference room. I continued documenting, taking photos of the fog outside and notes about what we'd seen on the security monitors. "You really think there's something in that fog?" Andy asked, his usual confidence wavering. "I think we need to be careful," I replied. "The Chinese team disappeared. Nunez's journal warned specifically about the fog and shadows moving within it. And now we're seeing exactly what he described." Mary shivered. "This whole city feels wrong, has from the start." I nodded. Everything about this place was off, too perfect, too empty, too staged, like a set waiting for actors, or a trap waiting to be sprung. Angela and Carol returned a few minutes later. "We've shut down the ventilation system," Angela reported, "but the fog's already in the building. It's coming through gaps around the windows, under doors, anywhere there's an opening." I looked down and noticed wisps of gray seeping under the conference room door. It reminded me of dry ice, the way it hugged the floor and crept forward. "Should we try to seal the room?" Mary asked. Angela shook her head. "With what? We don't have the supplies. Our best bet is to monitor the situation and be ready to move if necessary." Casey's voice came over the radio. "Angela, you need to see this." We hurried back to the security office. Casey pointed at one of the monitors, showing a hallway 2 floors below us. "The fog's thicker there, and look." He zoomed in on a dark shape moving through the gray mass. It was roughly human-sized, but moved with a strange flowing motion that wasn't quite right. "It's heading for the stairs," Casey said. Angela made a decision. "We're staying together from now on. Casey, grab the portable monitors if you can. We're setting up in the conference room where we have more space." Casey disconnected 2 of the smaller monitors, and we returned to the conference room. The fog had seeped in further, now covering the floor in a thin layer about an inch deep. "Is anyone else feeling tired?" Carol asked suddenly, leaning against the wall. Now that she mentioned it, I realized I was feeling unusually fatigued. My limbs felt heavy, and there was a dull pressure behind my eyes. "It's the fog," I said, remembering Nunez's journal. He wrote about feeling drained when the fog came. Angela looked sharply at me. "What exactly did he say?" I tried to recall the exact words. That it seemed to sap their energy, that the longer they were exposed to it, the weaker they felt. "Everyone, put your masks back on," Angela ordered. "Full filtration." We all complied, though I wasn't sure it would help. This didn't feel like a normal biological response to a toxin or pathogen. It felt different, like something was pulling at me from the inside. Casey set up the monitors on the conference table. One showed the hallway outside our room, the other the stairwell nearest to us. Both were filling with fog. "The temperature's dropping," Carol reported, checking her instruments. "It's down 5 degrees from 10 minutes ago." I felt it too, a creeping chill that seemed to come from the fog itself. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, but it didn't help much. "Look," Casey said, pointing at the monitor showing the hallway. A dark shape was moving through the fog, approaching our position. It was roughly human-shaped, but seemed to flow rather than walk, its edges blurring into the surrounding gray. "What the hell is that?" Andy whispered. No one answered. We all stared at the monitor, watching as the shape drew closer. It paused outside our door, seeming to hover there. "Can it see us?" Mary asked. "I don't know," Angela replied, her voice steady despite the situation. "But we should assume it can." The shape remained outside the door for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then it moved on, continuing down the hallway and out of the camera's view. We all exhaled collectively. "We need to get out of here," I said. "If the fog is already inside, staying put isn't going to help." Angela nodded. "Agreed, but we need to be smart about this. Those things are in the hallways and stairwells." "What about the elevator?" Mary suggested. "Too risky," Angela replied. "If the power fails while we're in it, we're trapped." "The emergency stairs at the east end," Carol said, pointing to the schematic. "They're enclosed and have roof access. If we can get to the roof, we might be able to signal for extraction." Angela considered this. "It's our best option. Everyone pack up only what you absolutely need. Leave the rest." We quickly gathered our essential gear: documentation, samples, communications equipment. I made sure to secure Nunez's journal in my pack. Whatever was happening here, his observations might be crucial to understanding it. As we prepared to leave, I noticed Carol swaying slightly. Her hand braced against the wall for support. "Carol, you okay?" I asked, moving toward her. She shook her head, looking disoriented. "I feel strange, weak." I reached her just as her knees buckled. She collapsed against me, and I lowered her to the floor. "Angela!" I called out. "Something's wrong with Carol." Angela rushed over, kneeling beside us. Carol's eyes were open but unfocused, her breathing shallow. "Carol, can you hear me?" Angela asked, checking her pulse. "What are you feeling?" "Tired," Carol mumbled. "So tired, like something's pulling at me." I looked around and noticed the fog had risen higher in the room, now about 6 inches deep. It seemed to be concentrating around Carol, swirling around her in a way that didn't match the air currents in the room. "We need to move her away from the fog," I said, attempting to lift her. Andy came to help, and together we carried Carol to the table, setting her on top of it to get her above the layer of fog. "Is she going to be okay?" Mary asked, her voice tight with worry. "I don't know," Angela replied honestly, "but we need to get out of this building." Andy suddenly staggered, grabbing the edge of the table for support. "Whoa," he said. I think I'm feeling it too." Before anyone could react, his eyes rolled back and he collapsed to the floor, landing heavily in the fog. "Andy," Mary cried, rushing to his side. I helped her lift him onto the table next to Carol. His pulse was steady, but slow. his breathing shallow like Carol's. Both of them were unconscious, but showing no physical injuries or symptoms besides the extreme fatigue. "It's the fog," I said, watching as it continued to rise, now nearly a foot deep. "It's draining them somehow, just like Nunez described." I was feeling it too, a persistent pull, like something was siphoning my energy. My movements were becoming sluggish, thoughts harder to hold on to. Looking around, I could see everyone was affected. Mary was leaning heavily on the table. Casey was sitting down with his head in his hands, and even Angela's posture had lost some of its usual rigidity. "We need to move," Angela said, her voice still commanding despite her obvious fatigue. "Now, before we're all too weak." "What about Carol and Andy?" Mary asked. "We'll carry them," Angela replied. "Peter, you and I will take Carol. Casey and Mary, you handle Andy." It took all our remaining strength to lift our unconscious teammates. The fog was up to our knees now, thick and cold, and moving through it felt like wading through molasses. Each step required deliberate effort. We made it to the door, Angela leading the way with one of Carol's arms over her shoulder, the other over mine. Behind us, Casey and Mary struggled with Andy's larger frame. Angela opened the door, revealing a hallway filled with fog up to our waists. And within that fog, dark shapes moved, 3 or 4 of them, flowing toward us with that same unnatural motion we'd seen on the monitors. "Back, back," Angela ordered, slamming the door shut. We retreated to the conference room, setting Carol and Andy back on the table. "The east stairwell is blocked," Angela said, her breathing heavy from exertion. "We need another way out." I felt a wave of dizziness hit me, stronger than before. The pull of the fog was intensifying, draining me faster. I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. "The windows," I suggested, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Break them. Get above the fog." Angela nodded. "Good thinking. Casey, is there anything we can use as a hammer?" Casey looked around, then pointed to the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. "That might work." Angela retrieved it and approached the window. The fog was now up to our waists, and I could see more dark shapes moving through it, circling us like sharks. With 3 powerful blows, Angela shattered the window. Cold air rushed in, temporarily dispersing some of the fog near the opening. "We need to climb out and up," she said. "There's a maintenance ladder that runs along the side of the building. If we can reach it, we might be able to get to the roof." I looked out the broken window. The fog was thick outside, but it seemed to be concentrated on the lower levels of the building. Above us, the air looked clearer. "What about Carol and Andy?" Mary asked again. Angela's expression was grim. "We can't carry them out the window and up a ladder. We need to get help first, then come back for them." It was an impossible choice, but I knew she was right. If we all stayed, we'd all succumb to whatever effect the fog was having. Our only chance was to get above it, call for extraction, and return with proper equipment. "I'll go first," Angela said. "Test the ladder. Peter, you follow, then Mary, then Casey." She climbed carefully through the broken window, reaching for the maintenance ladder that was just visible through the swirling fog. After a moment of stretching, she grabbed it and pulled herself across the gap. "It's secure," she called back. "Come on." I moved to follow, but another wave of dizziness hit me, stronger than before. The fog was now chest-high and still rising. Within it, the dark shapes were getting closer, more numerous. "Peter, now," Angela urged. I forced myself to move, fighting through the fatigue that threatened to overwhelm me. As I climbed through the window, I felt something cold brush against my leg. Not the fog itself, but something within it. Something solid, yet insubstantial at the same time. I kicked out instinctively and lunged for the ladder, barely catching it with one hand. Angela reached down, grabbing my wrist and helping pull me up. "Mary, come on," I called back through the window. Mary was struggling toward us, the fog now up to her shoulders. Behind her, Casey had slumped to the floor, succumbing to the same fatigue that had taken Carol and Andy. "Casey's down!" Mary cried, looking back. "Keep moving," Angela ordered. "We can't help him if we all fall." Mary reached the window just as the fog seemed to surge forward, engulfing her completely for a moment. When it receded, she was gone. "Mary!" I shouted, leaning dangerously far from the ladder. Angela pulled me back. "We have to go up, now." I wanted to argue, to go back for the others, but I knew she was right. The fog was rising faster now, as if pursuing us specifically. And within it, those dark shapes were converging on our position. We climbed as fast as our weakened bodies would allow, the cold metal of the ladder biting into my hands. Above us, the roof was maybe 30 feet away. Below, the fog continued to rise, bringing with it that same draining sensation. "Don't look down," Angela called. "Just keep climbing." I focused on the rungs in front of me, one after another. My arms burned with effort, each movement requiring more willpower than the last. But the higher we climbed, the lighter I felt, as if escaping the fog's influence. We reached the roof just as the fog began to curl over the edge behind us. Angela pulled herself over first, then reached back to help me up. We collapsed on the rooftop, gasping for breath. The roof was clear, no fog, no dark shapes, just the open sky above us, now darkening as night approached. The air was cold, but clean, and I could feel my strength slowly returning as I gulped it down. "We need to call for extraction," Angela said, already pulling out her satellite phone. "Immediate emergency evacuation." I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. Below us, the entire building was now engulfed in fog, with only the very top floor and roof remaining clear. And all around, as far as I could see, the city was submerged in that same gray mass, with countless dark shapes moving within it. Angela was speaking urgently into the phone, requesting immediate evacuation and reporting team members down. I couldn't focus on her words. All I could think about was what we'd just witnessed, and what it meant. The fog wasn't just weather. The shadows weren't just tricks of light. And this city, this perfect, empty city, wasn't abandoned. It was waiting, just as Nunez had written, and I feared we'd just found out what it was waiting for. I couldn't think straight anymore. The fog was climbing higher, swirling around the roof access door, and I knew we had minutes at best before it reached us here, too. "We need to move now," Angela said, pulling me back from the edge. "Extraction's coming, but we can't stay here." I nodded, still clutching Nunez's journal in my hand. The leather cover felt wrong somehow, too cold against my skin. "What about Andy and Carol? They're still unconscious." Angela's face hardened. "We carry them. No one gets left behind." We hurried back to the conference room where we'd left them. The fog had thickened, hanging about 3 feet off the floor like some kind of supernatural high tide mark. Andy and Carol were still slumped over the table where they'd collapsed. "I'll take Carol," Angela said, already moving toward her. "You and Casey get Andy. Mary, grab whatever equipment you can carry." I shoved the journal into my pack and moved to Andy's side. His breathing was shallow but steady. Casey took his legs while I hooked my arms under his shoulders. He was heavier than he looked. "On 3, I said, and Casey nodded. 1, 2, 3. We lifted, and I felt something pull in my lower back. Andy's head lolled against my chest, completely unresponsive. Across the table, Angela had already hoisted Carol into a fireman's carry. Mary was stuffing equipment into her pack. "The stairwell," Angela ordered. "We're not taking the elevator." "What's the extraction point?" Casey asked, his voice strained under Andy's weight. 6 blocks west, Angela replied, already moving toward the door. "Parking structure with a helipad on top. They'll meet us there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 6 blocks through streets filled with that unnatural fog. I wasn't sure we'd make it, but I didn't say that out loud. We shuffled awkwardly toward the stairwell door. Mary reached it first, pushing it open and holding it for us. The stairwell was clear for now, but I could see tendrils of fog seeping under the door at the bottom landing. "Down we go," Angela said, adjusting Carol's weight on her shoulder. The descent was brutal. 20 floors of concrete steps, carrying a grown man between us. Casey and I developed a rhythm after the first few flights. Step, drag, step, drag. My arms burned and sweat soaked through my shirt despite the unnatural cold. "Wait," Mary whispered when we reached the 10th floor. "Look." She pointed down the stairwell. The fog was rising, already past the 5th floor landing and climbing steadily. "Masks on," Angela ordered. I'd almost forgotten mine was hanging around my neck. I pulled it up with one hand, struggling to keep my grip on Andy. The filtered air felt thin and unsatisfying, but it was better than breathing whatever was in that fog. "We need to move faster," Casey said, his voice muffled behind his mask. We picked up the pace, practically dragging Andy down the steps now. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, just a dull ache where they should be. The fog reached the 7th floor, then the 8th. It was moving faster than we were. "It's like it's chasing us," Mary said, her voice tight with fear. She wasn't wrong. The fog seemed to be accelerating, reaching upward like it was trying to grab us, and within it, those darker patches were more defined now, elongated shapes that moved independently of the fog itself. I thought about what Nunez had written in his journal, the shadows in the fog, the feeling of being watched, hunted. By the time we reached the 12th floor, Mary stumbled, catching herself against the wall. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice slurring slightly. "I feel, heavy." I felt it too, a dragging exhaustion that went beyond the physical strain of carrying Andy. It was like something was pulling at me from the inside, draining my energy. "It's the fog," I said. "Nunez wrote about this. It does something to you. Takes something from you." "Keep moving," Angela ordered, but I could hear the strain in her voice too. We made it down 3 more flights before Mary collapsed. She went down hard, her knees buckling beneath her. Equipment scattered across the landing. "Mary!" Casey called out. I couldn't hold Andy alone. We lowered him to the steps as gently as we could, then I moved to Mary's side. Her eyes were open but unfocused, her breathing shallow. "Mary, can you hear me?" She nodded weakly. "Just need a minute." We didn't have a minute. The fog was at the 10th floor now, those shadow shapes moving more purposefully within it. One of them pressed against the stairwell window, a long, distorted silhouette that made my stomach clench. "We need to keep going," Angela said. She'd set Carol down against the wall and was checking Mary's pulse. "Peter, can Mary walk if you help her?" "I think so," I said, though I wasn't sure. I helped Mary to her feet. She leaned heavily against me, barely able to support her own weight. "Casey and I will take Andy and Carol," Angela decided. "You focus on getting Mary down." I nodded, wrapping Mary's arm around my shoulders. "Stay with me, okay? We just need to get to the bottom." "Something's wrong with me," she mumbled. "It's like, I can't." "I know. Just focus on the steps." We continued our descent, slower now. Mary's feet dragged on every step, and I was practically carrying her. Ahead of us, Angela and Casey struggled with their own burdens. The fog kept rising, now just 2 floors below us. When we reached the 5th floor, I heard a sound that made my skin crawl. A soft, sliding whisper, like fabric dragging across concrete. It was coming from below us, from within the fog. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Casey nodded, his eyes wide above his mask. "What is it?" "I don't know, and I don't want to find out," Angela said. "Keep moving." The fog reached the 4th floor landing, just as we hit the 3rd. I could see it now, rolling up the steps like some kind of living thing, purposeful and hungry. The shadows within it were more distinct, vaguely human-shaped, but wrong somehow, too tall and thin, moving in ways that human bodies shouldn't move. "They're coming for us," Mary whispered, her voice small and frightened. I tightened my grip around her waist. Just a little further. When we reached the second floor, Mary's legs gave out completely. She slumped against me, her head falling forward. "Mary." I shook her gently, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were closed, her body limp. "Peter, we need to go," Angela called from below. She and Casey had already reached the first floor landing with Andy and Carol. I couldn't carry Mary down the remaining steps by myself, not quickly enough. The fog was almost upon us, those shadow shapes reaching upward. I made a split-second decision, hoisting Mary over my shoulder in a fireman's carry like Angela had done with Carol. Pain shot through my back, but I ignored it, staggering down the steps as fast as I could. The fog touched the back of my boots as I reached the first floor landing. It was cold, colder than anything I'd ever felt, and where it touched me, I felt a numbness spreading up my leg. "The lobby's completely filled," Casey reported, peering through the small window in the stairwell door. "We can't go that way." "Service exit," Angela said, pointing to a sign on the wall. "Through the maintenance corridor." We followed her, moving as fast as we could with our unconscious teammates. The maintenance corridor was narrow and poorly lit, lined with pipes and electrical conduits. The fog was seeping in here too, flowing along the floor like water. Mary felt heavier with every step. My shoulders screamed in protest, and my vision was starting to narrow, dark spots dancing at the edges. Whatever the fog did to people, it was affecting me too, even through the mask. "Almost there," Angela called back to us. "Service door is just ahead." I could barely see her through the fog now. It was getting thicker, rising faster, and those shadow shapes were all around us, moving parallel to our escape route. One of them brushed against my arm, and I felt a wave of cold numbness shoot through my body. My knees buckled, and I nearly dropped Mary. "Peter!" Casey's voice sounded distant, muffled. I forced myself forward, one foot in front of the other. The shadow moved with me, staying just at the edge of my vision. I could feel it watching me, could feel its hunger. It wanted something from me, my heat, my energy, my life. Whatever these things were, they fed on the living. The service door appeared ahead, a rectangle of dim light in the darkness. Angela had already pushed through it, dragging Carol behind her. Casey followed with Andy. I was only steps behind them, but those steps felt like miles. Another shadow brushed against me, this one sliding across my back. The cold was immediate and intense, like being plunged into Arctic water. My lungs seized up, and I couldn't breathe. Mary's weight dragged me down, and I fell to one knee. "Peter!" Casey had turned back, was reaching for me. "Come on!" I couldn't speak, couldn't even nod. With the last of my strength, I pushed myself up and lunged toward the door. Casey grabbed my arm, pulling me through. We fell together onto wet pavement, Mary's body landing heavily beside us. Outside, the fog was everywhere. The entire city was submerged in it, buildings rising like islands in a gray sea. I couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. "Everyone okay?" Angela asked, her voice tight with strain. "Define okay," Casey muttered, helping me to my feet. I checked Mary, relieved to find her still breathing. "She's alive, but completely out. What about the others?" "Same," Angela said. "We need to keep moving. Casey, can you get a GPS reading on the extraction point?" Casey pulled out his tablet, shielding it from the fog with his body. "Signal's weak, but I'm getting something. 6 blocks west, just like you said." "How are we going to make it 6 blocks carrying 3 unconscious people?" I asked. "One step at a time," Angela replied grimly. "Casey, you lead. I'll take Carol. Peter, can you manage Mary?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could. My body felt drained, hollowed out. But we didn't have a choice. I hoisted Mary back over my shoulder, gritting my teeth against the pain. "What about Andy?" Casey asked. Angela looked around, then spotted a luggage cart near the service entrance. "That. We'll put him on that." Together, We lifted Andy onto the cart. It wasn't designed for a human body, but it would have to do. Casey took the handle, and we set off into the fog-shrouded streets. The going was slow and treacherous. The fog limited visibility to just a few feet, and those shadow shapes were everywhere now, moving around us like sharks circling prey. Twice I saw one reach toward Casey, only to pull back when he turned suddenly, as if they didn't want to be seen directly. 3 blocks down, Casey reported after what felt like hours. 3 to go. My lungs burned with each breath. The filtered air from my mask wasn't enough, and I could feel the fog trying to get through, trying to drain me like it had drained the others. Mary's weight was crushing, and my steps were becoming unsteady. One of the shadows moved directly in front of me, tall and thin and wrong. I stopped, unable to go around it. It seemed to study me, though it had no face that I could see. Then it reached out with what might have been an arm, but was too long, too fluid. "Get away from me," I rasped, backing up. The shadow followed, its form rippling. Where it moved, the fog seemed to thicken, to darken. I felt cold radiating from it, a cold that went beyond temperature, that reached inside me and gripped something vital. "Angela," I called, my voice weak. "There's one right in front of me." She turned, but I could tell from her expression that she didn't see it. "There's nothing there, Peter." But there was. It was right there, reaching for me. I could feel its cold touch on my face, seeping through my mask. My vision began to darken at the edges, and Mary's weight suddenly became too much. I staggered, nearly falling. "Peter!" Casey was at my side suddenly, supporting me. "Stay with us, man." The shadow retreated when Casey approached, moving back into the thicker fog. I gasped for air, feeling like I'd just been pulled from drowning. "They're hunting us," I said. "The shadows. They're picking us off one by one." 2 more blocks, Angela said, ignoring my words. "We can make it." But I wasn't sure we could. Mary felt impossibly heavy now, and my legs were starting to go numb, not from her weight, but from whatever the fog was doing to me. Casey wasn't looking much better, his face pale and drawn above his mask. Even Angela was slowing down, her breathing labored. The shadows seemed to sense our weakness. They grew bolder, pressing closer, reaching out more frequently. One brushed against my back, and I felt that same cold emptiness spreading through me. Another touched Casey's arm, and he stumbled, nearly losing his grip on the cart. "1 more block," he gasped, checking his tablet. "It's just ahead." I could barely see the tablet's screen through the fog. The shadows were all around us now, pressing in from all sides. I felt hunted, cornered. The city wasn't just empty. It was actively hostile. It wanted us gone, or dead, or something worse. "There it is," Angela said suddenly, pointing ahead. Through the fog, I could make out the hulking shape of a parking structure, the extraction point. Relief flooded through me, giving me a second wind. We moved faster now, driven by the promise of escape. The shadows didn't like that. They surged forward, more aggressive than before. One of them moved directly into Angela's path, and she walked right through it, unaware. But I saw her falter, saw her knees buckle momentarily before she caught herself. "They're trying to stop us," I said. "The shadows. They don't want us to leave." "Almost there," Casey said, ignoring me. "Just a little further." We reached the parking structure entrance, a gaping maw in the fog. Inside, the fog was thinner but still present, flowing along the concrete floor like water. The shadows followed us in, moving along the walls and ceiling now. "Up," Angela ordered. "The helipad's on the roof." The ramp seemed endless, spiraling upward through 6 levels of parking. Each level was identical, empty cars, perfect condition, no people. The fog thinned as we climbed, but the shadows didn't. They stayed with us, watching, waiting. By the 4th level, I couldn't go any further. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to my knees, Mary's weight dragging me down. "I can't," I gasped. "I can't carry her anymore." Casey stopped, looking back at me with concern. "We're almost there, Peter. 2 more levels. I can't, I repeated. My arms had gone numb and my vision was tunneling. Whatever the fog had done to Mary and the others, it was doing to me now, just more slowly. Angela set Carol down and came back to me. "Give her to me," she said. "You can't carry both of them," I protested. "I don't have to." She pointed upward. "Listen." And then I heard it, the distant thump of helicopter blades. Our extraction was here. With Angela's help, I managed to get back to my feet. We left Mary with Carol, and together we pushed Andy's cart up the ramp. The sound of the helicopter grew louder as we reached the 5th level, then the 6th. The roof access was a simple metal door at the top of the final ramp. Casey pushed it open, and cold, clear air rushed in. Air without fog, without shadows. The helicopter was already there, its rotors slicing through the night sky, its searchlight sweeping the rooftop. "We made it," Casey said, his voice cracking with relief. But we hadn't all made it. Mary, Carol, and Andy were still below, unconscious and vulnerable. "I'll go back for Carol," Angela said. "Casey, you take Andy to the helicopter. Peter, stay here and guide the pilot if needed." I wanted to protest, to insist on helping, but I could barely stand. Casey pushed Andy's cart across the rooftop toward the waiting helicopter while Angela disappeared back down the ramp. The shadows had followed us to the roof. I could see them moving at the edges of the helicopter's searchlight, flowing across the concrete like oil on water. They seemed agitated by the light, retreating when it passed over them, then surging forward again when it moved on. Casey reached the helicopter and was helped inside by the crew. I saw him gesturing urgently, pointing back toward the access door. 2 crew members jumped out and ran toward me. "Where are the others?" one of them shouted over the roar of the rotors. "Below," I said, pointing at the door. 3 more people, 2 unconscious." They nodded and disappeared through the door just as Angela emerged, carrying Carol. She looked exhausted, her face gray with fatigue. The crew members took Carol from her, and she sagged against the wall. "Mary," she gasped. "Still down there." One of the crew members went back down while the other helped Angela toward the helicopter. I followed, my legs barely supporting me. The shadows moved with me, staying just at the edge of the searchlight's beam. We reached the helicopter, and hands pulled us inside. I collapsed onto a seat, my body finally giving up. Through the open door, I could see the crew member emerging from the access door, carrying Mary. The shadows followed him, more agitated now, moving faster, more purposefully. "Hurry," I whispered, though he couldn't possibly hear me. He was halfway to the helicopter when one of the shadows surged forward, passing directly through him. He staggered, nearly dropping Mary, then recovered and pushed on. More shadows converged, flowing around him like a dark tide. He broke into a run, Mary's limp form bouncing in his arms. The shadows reached for them, elongated shapes stretching outward. I wanted to shout a warning, but my voice wouldn't work. All I could do was watch as the crewman raced the final few yards to the helicopter, the shadows right behind him. He made it, practically throwing Mary inside before diving in himself. "Go!" he shouted to the pilot. "Now!" The helicopter lifted off immediately, the sudden acceleration pushing me back into my seat. Below us, the rooftop was covered in shadows now, writhing and reaching upward, as if trying to grab the departing aircraft. The fog was rising too, surging upward in a gray column. We climbed higher, the city shrinking beneath us. The fog covered everything now, a perfect gray blanket with those unnatural shadows moving within it. It looked peaceful from up here, beautiful even. But I knew what was hiding in that fog, what was waiting in that perfect, empty city. I closed my eyes, too exhausted to keep them open any longer. The last thing I remember was the weight of Nunez's journal in my pack, pressing against my side like a cold reminder of what we'd barely escaped. I woke up when we hit turbulence. My head was pounding, and for a second I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back, the fog, the shadows, the mad dash to escape. The helicopter cabin was dim, lit only by instrument panels and a few overhead lights. I was sprawled across one of the bench seats. My back hurt like hell from carrying Mary. Across from me, Andy and Carol were strapped in, still unconscious. Mary was next to them, her head lolling against the vibrating wall of the cabin. Casey sat beside Angela near the front, both of them talking to the pilot. I tried to sit up, but my muscles screamed in protest. Everything felt heavy. The fog had done something to us, drained us somehow. I managed to prop myself up on my elbows and looked around, trying to get my bearings. "He's up," Casey said, noticing me. Angela turned and nodded, her face tight with exhaustion. "How long was I out?" I asked. My voice came out raspy, like I'd been gargling gravel. "About 20 minutes, Angela said. "We're heading back to base." I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear my head. "The others?" "Stable," Angela said. "Vitals are okay, but they're still unconscious." I looked at my teammates. Their faces were pale, almost gray in the dim light. Whatever that fog had done to them, it was worse than what it had done to me. Maybe because they'd been exposed longer. Or maybe I'd just gotten lucky. "Where are we?" I asked. "About 30 miles from the city," Casey said. "But we've got a problem." Of course we did. Nothing about this mission had been simple. "What kind of problem?" I asked, finally managing to sit up straight. Angela moved to sit next to me, wincing as she did. She wasn't showing it much, but I could tell she was hurting too. "The pilot can't raise anyone on the radio," she said quietly, "and the navigation systems are acting up." I glanced toward the cockpit. The pilot was focused on his instruments, flipping switches and adjusting dials. "What do you mean, acting up?" "Coordinates keep shifting," Casey explained. "GPS is jumping around, compass is spinning. Great, just great. We'd escaped the fog and those things, only to get lost on the way home." "Could it be interference from the city?" I asked. Angela shrugged. "Maybe, but we're 30 miles out. Whatever it is, it shouldn't have this kind of range." I reached for my pack, which someone had stowed under the bench. My hands were still shaking slightly as I pulled out my water bottle and took a long drink. The cool water helped clear my head a bit more. "Any theories?" I asked after I'd drained half the bottle. "Nothing concrete," Angela said. "But I'm thinking whatever that place is, it doesn't want us taking information out." The journal. I suddenly remembered Nunez's journal, which I'd stuffed in my pack before we left. I dug through the pack until I found it, the leather cover cool against my fingers. "You think it has something to do with this?" I asked, holding up the journal. Angela looked at it for a long moment. "I don't know, but it's the only physical thing we took from that place." "Besides ourselves," Casey added. I opened the journal, flipping through the pages until I found the last entry. The handwriting had deteriorated, becoming jagged and desperate. I read it again, trying to make sense of what Nunez had experienced. "He mentions something about the city not wanting them to leave," I said. "Says it started interfering with their equipment when they tried to call for extraction." Angela nodded grimly. "Just like us." The helicopter lurched suddenly, dropping several feet before the pilot corrected. My stomach flipped, and I grabbed the edge of the bench to steady myself. "What the hell was that?" Casey asked, his voice tight. The pilot didn't answer, but I could see him frantically adjusting controls. The helicopter stabilized, but I noticed we were flying lower than before. Is he taking us back?" I asked, a cold knot forming in my gut. "No," Angela said firmly. She got up and moved to the cockpit, leaning in to speak to the pilot. I couldn't hear what they were saying over the engine noise, but I saw her pointing at something on the instrument panel, then gesturing ahead. When she came back, her expression was grim. "We're losing altitude. Engines are struggling." "Mechanical failure?" Casey asked. "Pilot says no. Everything checks out mechanically, but it's like something's pulling us down." The words sent a chill through me. I looked out the window, half expecting to see those shadow figures reaching up for us, trying to drag us back. but there was nothing. Just darkness and the occasional glint of moonlight on water below. "How far are we from base?" I asked. "Should be another 40 minutes, Angela said. "But at this rate..." She didn't need to finish. "At this rate, we might not make it." I turned to the window again, pressing my face against the cool glass to look down. That's when I saw it, a thin tendril of fog, impossibly high, curling up from below. It wasn't natural fog. It was too concentrated, too purposeful in the way it moved. "Angela," I said, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Look." She leaned across me to peer out the window. Her breath caught. Son of a bitch. More tendrils were rising now, wispy fingers of gray reaching up toward the helicopter. They were still 100 feet below us, but climbing fast. "It's following us," Casey said, looking out his own window. "That's not possible," Angela said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe her own words. The helicopter dropped again, more sharply this time. The pilot swore loudly enough for us to hear him over the engines. "We need to do something," I said, stating the obvious because I couldn't think of anything else. Angela moved back to the cockpit, speaking urgently to the pilot. I watched the fog tendrils continuing to rise. They were maybe 50 feet below us now, and I swore I could see darker shapes within them, the same shadow figures we'd seen in the city. "What the hell are those things?" Casey asked, his voice barely audible over the sound of the struggling engines. I shook my head. "I don't know, but they're not giving up." The helicopter shuddered, and for a moment I was sure we were going to drop right into those waiting tendrils. But the pilot managed to keep us airborne, though we were definitely losing altitude. Angela came back, her face pale. "Pilot says we're being pulled down. He's giving it everything, but we're still losing height." "What about calling for help?" I asked. Still nothing but static on all channels. I looked back at the journal in my hands. Nunez had faced this too. His team had tried to leave, and something had stopped them. I flipped frantically through the pages, looking for anything that might help us. "Wait," I said, finding a passage I hadn't noticed before. Nunez wrote something about the shadows. Angela leaned in as I read aloud. "They retreat from direct light, not sunlight. They move freely in daylight through the fog, but artificial light, especially bright, focused beams, seems to repel them. Dr. Chen used a spotlight from the helicopter to clear a path through them." I looked up at Angela. "The searchlight. Does the helicopter have a searchlight?" "Yes," she said, already moving back to the cockpit. I kept reading. "The effect is temporary. They learn, adapt, but it gives us time." The helicopter lurched again, dropping several more feet. I looked out the window and saw the tendrils of fog were almost upon us, dark shapes moving within them. "Hurry!" I called to Angela. There was a mechanical whirring sound, and suddenly a powerful beam of light cut through the darkness beneath us. The effect was immediate. The fog tendrils recoiled, twisting away from the light like they were in pain. "It's working!" Casey shouted. The helicopter steadied, no longer being pulled downward. The pilot increased power, and we started to climb again. But I noticed something troubling. At the edges of the light beam, the fog was already starting to creep back in, testing the boundaries. "They're adapting," I said, remembering Nunez's warning. "We need more light." Angela must have had the same thought, because a second later, all the exterior lights on the helicopter came on. Navigation lights, landing lights, every bulb the aircraft had. The fog retreated further, giving us a clear bubble of space. The helicopter continued to climb, engines straining, but no longer fighting against that unnatural downward pull. I kept my eyes fixed on the fog below us, watching for any sign that it was following. For several tense minutes, it seemed to hover, as if deciding whether to pursue. Then, slowly, it began to recede, sinking back toward the earth. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "We're clear," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Angela came back from the cockpit, dropping heavily onto the bench beside me. Pilot says we're climbing normally now. Navigation systems are starting to stabilize. So we're good? Casey asked. For now, Angela said. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. But we're not taking any chances. Lights stay on until we're back at base. I nodded, still watching the fog below us. It was definitely retreating, flowing back in the direction we'd come from, back toward the city. As we gained altitude, I could see more of it, a vast gray blanket covering miles of coastline, centered on the gleaming towers of the empty city. Except it wasn't empty, was it? Those shadows, whatever they were, lived there, hunted there, and they'd nearly hunted us. What the hell were those things? Casey asked, echoing my thoughts. I don't know, I said. But they didn't want us to leave. Why? Angela asked. What's so important about us? I held up Nunez's journal. Maybe this. Maybe they didn't want us taking information out. Or maybe they just didn't want us leaving at all, Casey suggested. Maybe they wanted us. The thought sent a chill through me. I remembered how the shadows had moved through the fog, purposeful in hunting. Not random patterns, intelligent movement. We need to read this whole journal, I said. Nunez and his team encountered those things before us. They might have figured out what they are. Angela nodded. When we get back to base, right now we need to focus on our team. She glanced at Andy, Carol, and Mary, still unconscious. I looked at them too, worry gnawing at me. Will they be okay? I don't know, Angela admitted. Whatever that fog did to them, we don't understand it. We'll get them proper medical attention as soon as we land. The helicopter had stabilized now, flying smoothly at a higher altitude. Through the cockpit window, I could see stars appearing as we left the coastal cloud cover behind. The navigation lights blinked steadily, keeping the darkness at bay. I leaned back against the vibrating wall of the cabin, exhaustion washing over me again. My muscles ached and my head still pounded. But we were alive. We'd made it out. For now. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, Casey was shaking my shoulder. Peter, wake up. You need to see this. I blinked, disoriented. What? What is it? Look. He pointed out the window. I pressed my face against the glass, looking down. We were high enough now to see for miles, and what I saw made my breath catch. The fog had retreated completely, flowing back to the city like water down a drain. The moon was out, casting silver light over the landscape below. And there, in the middle of it all, was the city. Gleaming towers of glass and steel, streets gleaming towers of glass and steel, streets laid out in that perfect grid pattern we'd observed earlier. But something was different now. It's changing, I said, squinting to make sure I wasn't seeing things. The city was shifting before our eyes. Buildings were rearranging themselves, streets realigning in new patterns. It wasn't violent or dramatic, more like watching time-lapse footage of a construction project, but in real time. That's not possible, Angela said, now looking out the window beside me. But it was happening. The fog had concentrated itself in the center of the city, swirling like water circling a drain. And as it moved, the city moved with it, reconfiguring itself into something new. It's like it's resetting, Casey said. The word felt right, like the city was returning to some default state or preparing itself for something new. I thought about how perfect everything had been when we arrived. The untouched buildings, the pristine streets. Had it reset itself for us? And now it was doing it again, maybe preparing for the next visitors? We need to document this, Angela said, pulling out her camera. She snapped several photos through the window, though I wasn't sure how well they'd turn out at this distance and angle. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the sight. The city continued its impossible reconfiguration for several minutes, then gradually slowed and stopped. The fog settled over it like a blanket, hiding it from view once more. "Did everyone else see that?" Casey asked, looking around the cabin. The pilot nodded without turning, his hands steady on the controls but his shoulders tense. Andy, Carol, and Mary remained unconscious, oblivious to what we'd just witnessed. "I've got it on camera," Angela said, checking her shots. "Some of them are blurry, but a few came out clear enough." I turned away from the window, my mind racing. That city, it's not just a place, it's something else. "A machine?" Casey suggested. "Or an organism," Angela said quietly. "Something alive." The thought made my skin crawl. We'd been walking around inside something alive, something that could rearrange itself at will. And those shadows, were they part of it, or something else entirely? I looked down at Nunez's journal in my lap. "Maybe the answers are in here." "Maybe," Angela agreed. "But right now, we need to focus on getting back safely and getting medical attention for the team." I nodded, though I couldn't help opening the journal again, scanning its pages for any mention of the city reconfiguring itself. I didn't find anything in my quick search, but there was a lot to go through. Nunez and his team had been in the city for days before things went wrong. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. "I've re-established radio contact with base, ETA 20 minutes. A collective sigh of relief went through the cabin. We were almost home. "Any update on our team?" Angela asked, moving toward our unconscious colleagues. I joined her, checking Andy's pulse. It was steady but slow, his skin cool to the touch. Carol and Mary were in similar states, alive but unresponsive. "No change," I said. "But they're stable." Angela nodded, the worry clear on her face despite her professional demeanor. "Base is preparing a medical team to meet us when we land." I returned to my seat, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. Every muscle in my body ached, and my head still throbbed. The adrenaline that had kept me going was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep fatigue. "You okay?" Casey asked, noticing my grimace as I sat down. "Just tired," I said. "And sore. Carrying Mary wasn't exactly easy." "You did good," he said. "We all did. We got out." I nodded, though I wasn't sure we could really call it a success. 3 of our team were unconscious, and we'd barely escaped with our lives, and we still had no real answers about what the city was, or those shadows, or why it had appeared in the first place. The helicopter began its descent as we approached the base. Through the cockpit window, I could see the landing pad lit up, medical personnel waiting with stretchers. We'd made it back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd brought something back with us. Not just Nunez's journal, but something less tangible, a connection to that place, a thread that couldn't be severed so easily. As we touched down, medical teams rushed forward. The door slid open, and cool, clean air rushed in, a stark contrast to the stale, recycled air of the helicopter cabin. The medical team efficiently transferred Andy, Carol, and Mary onto stretchers and whisked them away toward the base hospital. Angela was already talking to a man in a suit, probably someone from command, wanting an immediate debrief. Casey climbed out after her, his movements stiff and tired. I stayed seated for a moment longer, Nunez's journal still in my hands. I should turn it in. It was evidence, part of our findings. But something made me hesitate. I needed to read it first, to understand what Nunez and his team had discovered before us, what they'd experienced, what had happened to them. I slipped the journal into my pack and finally stood up, wincing at the protest from my overtaxed muscles. As I stepped out of the helicopter, the night air hit my face, cool and refreshing. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. We were back. We were safe. But as I looked up at the stars, I couldn't help wondering if we'd truly escaped. That city, with its perfect buildings and empty streets and shadows in the fog, it had let us go. But something told me it wasn't finished with us yet. I shouldered my pack, feeling the weight of Nunez's journal inside it, and followed the others toward the base. Whatever answers awaited us, they would have to wait until morning. Right now, All I wanted was a hot shower and about 12 hours of dreamless sleep. But as I walked away from the helicopter, I couldn't resist one last glance back toward the coast, toward the city. It was far beyond the horizon now, hidden by distance and darkness. But I knew it was there, waiting. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me despite the mild night, that we would be going back. We had to. We had questions that needed answers. And something told me that city was the only place we'd find them. I woke up to Andy groaning from across the helicopter cabin. It had been maybe an hour since we'd escaped the city, and this was the first sound any of them had made. He shifted in his seat, eyes still closed, face scrunched up like he was having a bad dream. "Hey," I said, leaning forward. My voice came out raspy. My throat felt like I'd been breathing dust. "Andy, you with us?" No response, just another groan as his head rolled to the side. I glanced at Angela, who'd been watching the three unconscious team members like a hawk since they'd been strapped in. She caught my eye and shook her head slightly. "Don't push it." The steady thrum of the helicopter rotors had become white noise at this point. We'd been flying for what felt like forever, putting distance between us and that place, the city. Just thinking about it made my skin crawl. Carol stirred next, her fingers twitching against the restraints that kept her from sliding off the bench during turbulence. Mary remained completely still, her breathing shallow but steady. The medical officer had checked their vitals twice already and said they were stable, just unresponsive. "How long till we reach the mainland?" I asked. Casey looked up from his tablet. "Another 40 minutes, give or take." I nodded, trying to ignore the headache pounding behind my eyes. The journal sat heavy in my lap, Nunez's journal. I hadn't let it out of my sight since we'd escaped. My hands rested on its worn leather cover, feeling the slight indentations where Nunez had pressed too hard with his pen. Andy's eyes fluttered open. He blinked rapidly, confusion washing over his face as he took in his surroundings. "What?" he started, then coughed. "What happened?" Angela was at his side immediately, offering him water from her canteen. "Easy, small sips." I watched as Andy drank, his hands shaking slightly. He pulled back after a moment, still disoriented. "Why am I strapped in?" he asked, tugging weakly at the restraints. "Last thing I remember, we were in that office building, the one with the..." He trailed off, brow furrowing as he tried to recall. "The fog," I finished for him. There was fog coming up from the streets. Andy stared at me blankly. "Fog? I don't..." He shook his head slowly. "I remember the building, the conference room. We were looking at some documents, right? City plans or something." Angela and I exchanged glances. She gave me a subtle shake of her head. "Don't push it," but I couldn't help myself. "Andy, the fog was everywhere. It filled the streets, then started rising up the building. You and Carol collapsed when it reached us." He frowned. "I don't remember any fog." Before I could respond, Carol let out a small moan. Her eyes opened, darting around wildly before fixing on Angela. "Where are we?" she asked, voice barely audible over the helicopter noise. "Heading back to base," Angela answered calmly. "How are you feeling?" Carol considered the question, flexing her fingers and shifting in her restraints. "Tired, really tired, and my head hurts." She paused, looking around the cabin. "Why are we in the helicopter? Did something happen?" This time I stayed quiet, letting Angela handle it. She explained we'd completed our survey of the city and were returning as scheduled. Carol accepted this without question, which struck me as odd. Carol questioned everything. It was what made her such a good scientist. "I don't remember leaving," she said after a moment. "Did I pass out or something?" "Something like that," Angela replied, carefully neutral. "We'll get you checked out when we land." Mary woke up last, about 10 minutes later. Her reaction mirrored the others: confusion, disorientation, and no memory of the fog or our frantic escape. She remembered entering the office building, setting up in the conference room. But nothing after that. The three of them talked quietly among themselves, trying to piece together their missing time. I sat back, clutching Nunez's journal tighter. They didn't remember. None of them remembered the shadows moving through the fog, or how we'd barely made it to the helipad. The terror, the exhaustion, the certainty we were being hunted, all gone from their minds. Casey slid onto the bench beside me, keeping his voice low. "This is weird, right? I mean, they should remember something." "Yeah," I agreed. "Very weird." "What do you think happened to them?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What could I say? That I thought the city had done something to them, that whatever lived in that fog had taken their memories. It sounded crazy, even to me. "I don't know," I said finally, "but I'm going to find out." I opened Nunez's journal, flipping through the pages until I found what I was looking for, an entry from about halfway through his time in the city. "Liu doesn't remember the incident at the hospital. She insists we never went to the 5th floor, even though Chen and I both saw what happened to her there. Chen thinks the city is protecting itself somehow. I'm starting to think he's right." I showed it to Casey, who read it twice before looking up at me with wide eyes. "You think the same thing happened to them? The city erased their memories?" "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted. "But the parallels are hard to ignore." The medical officer came over to check on the others again, and Casey moved away, leaving me alone with the journal. I continued reading, looking for any mention of memory loss or similar phenomena, but Nunez's entries grew increasingly disjointed after that point, focusing more on the shadows and his growing paranoia. About 20 minutes from the mainland, Angela called a team meeting. The 5 of us huddled in the center of the cabin, voices low despite the helicopter noise ensuring our privacy. "All right, we need to talk before we land," she said. "All business. Our equipment readings are showing some anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" I asked. "Corrupted data files, for one. And some of our measurements don't make sense. Atmospheric readings that fluctuate wildly, structural analyses that contradict each other." Casey pulled out his tablet. "My cameras caught some weird artifacts too. Look at this." He showed us footage from inside the office building. The image quality was poor, with strange distortions whenever the camera panned toward the windows. And this is from the street level. This footage was worse, pixelated and jumpy, with entire sections missing. "Could it be equipment malfunction?" Mary suggested. "Maybe electromagnetic interference from the city's power systems?" "Possibly," Angela conceded. "But all our equipment? Simultaneously?" "What about your observations?" I asked Andy, Carol, and Mary. "What do you remember seeing in the city?" They exchanged glances before Andy spoke. Empty streets, perfect buildings, no people, but signs they'd been there recently. "And the fog?" I pressed. "The shadows?" 3 blank stares met mine. "There wasn't any fog," Carol said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "It was clear the whole time we were there." I opened my mouth to argue, but Angela cut me off with a sharp look. "We'll sort through the data when we land," she said firmly. "For now, I want everyone to prepare for debriefing. We'll be asked to give individual accounts of what we observed. Stick to the facts, what you personally saw and documented." The implication was clear. No speculation, no wild theories, just the facts. "What about this?" I held up Nunez's journal. Angela hesitated, her eyes on the battered leather book. "We'll turn that in as evidence, of course." Something in her tone made me uneasy. I'd been planning to hand it over to the research team, but suddenly I wasn't so sure. This journal was the only corroboration for what I'd experienced. What Casey and Angela had experienced too, though Angela seemed determined to downplay it. "Right," I said, sliding the journal into my pack. "Of course." The rest of the flight passed in tense silence. I could feel Angela watching me, but I avoided her gaze, pretending to review my notes. In reality, I was thinking about what would happen when we landed. Would anyone believe what we'd seen? Or would they dismiss it as equipment malfunction, stress, maybe even hallucinations. As the helicopter began its descent, I felt a strange sensation crawl up my spine, the feeling of being watched. I turned to look out the window, half expecting to see tendrils of fog following us, but there was nothing but clear sky and the approaching coastline. Still, the feeling persisted. We touched down on the helipad at the research facility, and medical personnel immediately boarded to check on Andy, Carol, and Mary. They were whisked away on gurneys despite their protests that they felt fine, just tired. The rest of us were directed to the debriefing room, where a team of senior researchers waited. The debriefing was exactly as I'd feared. Each of us gave our account, and the discrepancies were immediately apparent. Angela, Casey, and I described the fog and our frantic escape, while the data from our equipment showed nothing unusual about the atmospheric conditions. Our footage of the shadows was dismissed as camera artifacts. The strange behavior of the helicopter's navigation systems was attributed to a localized electromagnetic anomaly. Dr. Reeves, the project lead, listened to my account with thinly veiled skepticism. "Let me make sure I understand," he said when I'd finished. "You're claiming this fog was, what, sentient? That it hunted you?" Put that way, it sounded ridiculous, but I held my ground. "I'm reporting what I observed. The fog moved against the wind, it followed us specifically, and there were shapes moving within it." "Shapes," he repeated flatly. "And these shapes were what, exactly?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But they moved with purpose. They were tracking us." Dr. Reeves exchanged glances with his colleagues. "Mr. Brewer, you've had quite an ordeal. It's not uncommon for stress and fatigue to affect perception." "I know what I saw," I insisted. "And I'm not the only one. Casey and Angela saw it too." Casey nodded reluctantly when all eyes turned to him. Angela's response was more measured. "We observed unusual atmospheric phenomena," she said carefully. "The fog behaved in ways that seemed unnatural, yes. As for the rest," she trailed off with a small shrug. I stared at her, feeling betrayed. She'd been there. She'd seen what I'd seen. But now she was hedging, distancing herself from the more fantastic elements of our experience. "What about Nunez's journal?" I asked, pulling it from my pack. "He documented the same phenomena. The fog, the shadows, the memory loss." Dr. Reeves took the journal, flipping through it with clinical detachment. "Yes, we'll need to analyze this thoroughly. Thank you for recovering it." The way he said it, like the journal was just another data point, not the desperate warnings of a man who'd faced the same horrors we had, made my stomach turn. The debriefing continued for hours. Our equipment was collected, our notes cataloged, our observations recorded and cross-referenced. By the end, I was exhausted, my headache worse than before. But the worst was yet to come. "We'll be sending another team," Dr. Reeves announced as the session wound down. "A larger expedition, better equipped with specific protocols for handling the atmospheric anomalies you encountered." "You can't," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "It's not safe." Dr. Reeves regarded me with what might have been pity. "Mr. Brewer, I understand your concern, but we can't base research decisions on one team's subjective experience, especially when the data doesn't support it. The city represents an unprecedented opportunity for study." "The Chinese team disappeared," I reminded him. "And now 3 members of our team have no memory of what happened to them. Doesn't that concern you?" "Of course it does," he said smoothly, "which is why the next team will take additional precautions. In fact, we'd like you to consult on the expedition planning, given your experience." I shook my head. "I'm not going back there." The room went silent. In our field, refusing an assignment was practically unheard of, especially one of this magnitude. Careers were made on discoveries like this. "Perhaps you should take some time to consider," Dr. Reeves suggested, his tone making it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. "Rest, recover, review your notes. We won't be launching the next expedition for at least 2 weeks." I didn't argue further. What was the point? They'd already made up their minds. The city was too tempting, too full of potential discoveries. They wouldn't be deterred by warnings from someone they clearly thought was suffering from stress-induced paranoia. As the debriefing broke up, I noticed Dr. Reeves slip Nunez's journal into a secure case, which was then handed to a staff member. Something inside me rebelled at the thought of losing that journal, the only proof I had that I wasn't crazy. I followed the staff member down the corridor, keeping my distance. When she stopped to talk to a colleague, I moved quickly, approaching with a casual air. "Excuse me," I said, pointing to the case. "Dr. Reeves asked me to take another look at that journal. There's a specific passage I need to reference for my report." She hesitated, clearly unsure. "You can call him if you want," I offered, knowing she wouldn't want to bother the project lead with something so minor. "I just need it for 10 minutes, and I can bring it right back to the lab." The ploy worked. She handed over the case with only a mild request to be careful with it. I thanked her and walked briskly toward my temporary office, heart pounding. Once inside, I locked the door and opened the case. The journal lay inside, looking ordinary and worn, not at all like the dangerous object I now knew it to be. I slipped it into my personal bag, replacing it with my own field notebook, which was similar enough in appearance to pass a casual inspection when the case was closed. I knew I was crossing a line. Stealing research materials was a serious breach of protocol, possibly even illegal. But I couldn't let the journal disappear into some classified file, its warnings unheeded. People needed to know what was in that city, what it could do. And if the official channels wouldn't listen, I'd find someone who would. I left the facility an hour later, citing my need for rest after the ordeal. No one questioned me. I'd been officially placed on medical leave pending psychological evaluation, standard procedure after traumatic field incidents, they assured me. I didn't argue. As I drove away from the research complex, Nunez's journal secure in my bag, I felt that crawling sensation again, the feeling of being watched. I checked my rearview mirror repeatedly, half expecting to see fog rolling down the road behind me. There was nothing, of course, just the empty highway and the setting sun. But the feeling didn't go away, and somehow I knew it never would, not completely. Part of me was still in that city, would always be in that city, and part of the city was in me now, watching, waiting. I wouldn't go back. Nothing could make me set foot in that place again, but others would. The next expedition team, full of eager scientists armed with better equipment and strict protocols, none of which would save them when the fog rose and the shadows came. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, resolve hardening. I had Nunez's journal and my own experience. I had the truth. Now I just needed to make someone believe it,